I will call to order the February Finance Committee meeting. Due to the Safer at Home order, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there's a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. A committee member will be recognized and will raise their hand and state their vote. Thank everybody for being here. I see Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Councilmember McIntosh and Taylor here, and I am here. That is all four of the committee members. And I'm also seeing Councilmember Burke, Scipio, Mundy are here, and the mayor is here. Did I miss anyone? Yeah, and John Larson, he was the first one on. Sorry about that. So anyway, everybody is here. We will proceed with the consent agenda. I have been given from Mayor Pro Tem Burke consent 5, 6, 7, 8, and 12. Are there any others?
That's Adams.
What's that?
That's Adams, not Burke.
What did I say? I'm sorry.
Burke.
I'm sorry. My
Old
apologies.
habits.
To both families. Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the balance?
I move to approve the balance of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. I will go down the roll call. Mayor Pro Tem Adams,
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
and the chair votes yes. So the balance of the consent is approved. We will go down to consent items first. I will start with C5. If the city clerk will please read that one.
Item C5, resolution authorizing submission of an application to the Department of Homeland Security for assistance to firefighters grant.
Ms. Adams, you had a question or comment here.
Yes, I did. On the grant, it's asking for 80,000, not to exceed 80,000. But the grant is for 773,698. Why wouldn't we just ask for the 77,369 versus the 80,000? I know everybody's saying, well, that's just a couple of thousand, but we in a budget, whatever crisis. And I just need to know.
Mr. Kane, would you like to comment?
Yes, sir, Chairman Clark. Good evening, Mayor Joins, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Chairman, members of the committee, and members of the council. I hope you're all doing well. So the short answer to that is we just put a not to exceed $80,000 on there, but the match is, I believe, the 10%. So it wouldn't go over that amount anyway. If you'd like, we could revise the item prior to the meeting on Monday.
Thank you, Mr. DeCane. I think we should. If the match is 10%, we need, and the number that you put in the CARF needs to be 10%.
Yes, ma'am, we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, any other questions or comments on C5? If not, can I get a motion to approve?
I move for approval of C5.
We have a motion and a second to approve C5. I will do a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem Adams,
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
and Mr. Clark votes yes. So C5 is approved. We will now go to C6. If the clerk would please read that one.
Item C6, resolution seeking authorization to apply for 2020 staffing for adequate fire and emergency response SAFER grant.
Ms. Adams.
Yes, I just want to know, are these funds already part of the budget or will they have to be added?
I'll take a stab at that
Mr.
one.
Kane, go ahead.
Mayor Pro Tem's really trying to stump the ACM this afternoon. So there is, as far as the funds that'll be, the funds that are marked in there that are the city cost are for outfitting the new employees under the grant. So those funds would be put into the budget for the year that we're going to hire those individuals. So they're not in the budget yet. We need to make sure we get the grant, and then we'll time the hiring and the funding of that inventory at the same time. So council will ultimately approve the addition of that equipment when those hires are made.
Okay, so this is simply a motion to approve the action to request the grant.
Yes, sir.
And then if we get it then we'll have a better idea of when the new employees would come on board, and then we could then probably amend the budget to include the outfitting requirements.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this one?
Move for
question.
approval of C6.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, to approve C6. We will now vote. Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Yay.
And Mr. Clark votes yes. So that one is approved. We will now go to item C7.
Item C7, resolution awarding construction contract for Washington Park Phase 1 improvements and Old Town drainage improvements located in the Northwest Ward and South Ward.
Ms. Adams?
Yes. I read through all of the resolutions for the contracts, and I saw the documentation for the minority, women's and business enterprise inclusion. But when looking at the response sheet from the panel, I'm just wondering, so in the end, there may need to be a place specific that tells council whether any minority subcontractors or contractors are being acquired or included. And if it's already there, you can answer such.
Okay, Mr. Kane, you're up again.
I'm going to have to defer this one. I'm not certain to whom. Is anybody from Business Inclusion and Advancement in the meeting?
Or purchasing, or anybody that thinks they can answer it.
Chair Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
what I'm looking for is, again, if the city is so enthusiastic or encumbered to actually move on the action of diversity and inclusion of minority and business and women. You know, I think when these contracts come through, and you know, I've been talking about this for 12 years, we don't need to just sign off at the end, well, they didn't do well on this part of this, the evaluation, and say, well, they're the lowest bidder and there are no minorities. I think, you know, we need to have, I feel, a process or strategy in place or create, like we're going to see in some other items down in the general agenda, to make this happen. We can't do it, then we need to collaborate, coordinate with the Forsyth County Schools, Forsyth Tech, businesses, to make this happen. I'm not happy with this right now. The way it looks when I read through the panel evaluation sheet, Chair Clark. I mean, I'm going to vote on it. You know, I'm going to recommend the approval of it, but I want all of us to understand we're living in a time now we're either going to walk it or just talk it.
Okay. The city manager had a comment on this, Ms. Adams. Hold a second. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and members of the Finance Committee. Mayor Pro Tem Adams, you're correct. The low bidder, central builders of Mebane, which is on page 2 of the CARF. The goals for the project were, let me read this. The goals for the project were 17% minority and 10% women, and they achieved goals of 8% minority and 19% women. So they did not meet the goals, and that's why it went to the good faith effort. I can tell you, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, that the MWB Advisory Citizen Committee is actively working with staff. They are concerned about our good faith efforts process, and we're looking at options for how it may take state action, but where we could tighten up our requirements to make it, to try to make sure that the companies have a more stringent method of ensuring minority participation.
Mr. Garrity and Chair Clark and members of the council, Mayor, we can help with that. And I know there's another piece about some other things in the budget about austerity. I got that. But again, there are certain things that we need to be focusing on, again, if we're serious about it. And that means the collaboration, because we know government, city can't do everything. But again, when you look at us coming out of this pandemic, and companies will be looking for places to either relocate or locate. All of the things that we've been talking about for the past decade that we are not successful at, that's challenging for us, we need to now start to implement or create a plan to really address them, besides just bringing in consultants, talking about it. We got a plan, but there's no successful results for the community and the people right now who are suffering the most to see those results. That the city has this, they're working with X, and it has impacted my family and I, whereas now I am training to be a carpenter or a plumber or a sheetrock or a machinist. That's all I'm saying, Chair Clark. I'm not going to jump on that because I got another one coming up in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, I would point out that in total, they exceeded their goal. Their goal was 27 and they got 28%, but they were flipped on the women versus minority. Lee, I think it would be interesting to find out what sub-trades that the our committee set as goals, were there actually minority vendors in the appropriate ones for that? Because I think they look at, and if you got a project, and if it's all plumbing, then you got to have minority and women plumbers, or you will have nothing. I'd be curious to know, and this gets back to Miss Adams' thing, what trades did they not have participation where they were expecting? The other suspicion I have is I'm wondering if there was one that they thought would be minority turned out to be female, because the numbers are basically flipped. So I'd be just curious if they could dig down a little bit. And if we could have that, it's just in the information for the Monday meeting would be good. Now, we're meeting Monday and Tuesday, by the way. We're going to meet up in Monday, somebody's birthday. It's not Washington's. Okay, I'm sorry. Mike's closed or something anyway. All right. Miss Adams?
I move for approval of item C8. Is that the one?
No, I think it's C7.
C7.
We have a motion to approve C7. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and understanding that we will be getting a little more detail on this for the Monday night meeting. Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
And Mr. Clark votes yes, so C7 is approved. We will now go to C8.
Item C8, resolution awarding contract to Nova Street Bridge Replacement, Northeast Ward.
Ms. Adams, you have a comment?
Yes. I just want to, as you know, the former past Mayor Pro Tem Burke and I worked real hard on getting this money, Councilmember Burke, for this bridge. Again, my same comments, Chair Clark, as the previous item. What if are there any minority participation? And when I'm talking about minority, let me clarify that. As I move forward, I will be particularly saying, are there any Black people contractors? Because this pandemic, even before the pandemic, Black people, businesses, upstarts were struggling. And we are struggling even more now than ever. And again, I challenge the city to do more than what it's doing and to work diligently to collaborate, to get Black youth, Black men, Black women, help them to find a pathway to equity. And with that, Chair, I move for approval of C8.
Okay, can I get a motion on that?
Second.
Okay, and I would also, to Mr. Garrity, maybe the same information here, the low bidder has agreed to some goals other than the ones that the committee came up with. Again, I'd be interested if they could be more specific to the trades. Because what I have seen, at least in the jobs in my ward, there are certain trades that are and sidewalks is probably the best example I have, where we have numerous black subcontractors available, but there are other trades out there for which there are not. So I think if you want to find somebody a job, you got to get down to the trade level. And as Ms. Adams says, do you want to be a plumber or an electrician, and may make a big difference on whether or not there's work available. So with that, we will now take a vote on C8. Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
and Mr. Clark votes yes. So that is done. We will now go to C12. If the clerk will please read that.
Item C12, fiscal year 2019-2020 Community Agency Funding Report.
Ms. Adams, you have the floor.
Yes. I appreciate staff doing all of this work for us to get this. Previous years, way back, we didn't have the deep dive into this type of reporting for funded community agencies. My question is, Chair Clark, besides putting this on our website, which most people don't have, we think people have access to websites, internet, broadband. What other ways are we trying to communicate this to the public, as well as taking it and making it at a level that people understand without having to read 58 pages?
I guess, Lee, if I may broaden the question, we're just getting ready to start the budget process. Matter of fact, Ms. Tony's coming up in just a minute on the agenda. How do we advertise to the community that there are funds available for organizations just like these listed, and what those categories are and how they apply and all that type of stuff?
Thank you, Chairman Clark. The Community Allocation Committee is actually just beginning that process. We advertise in early fall, start that grantee process every year for all the grantees. So the deadline, I think, just passed, so when they could submit items, submit their grant requests, but we advertise, we send out direct emails, we put it, and we also use social media. But I'll get you more information from Ms. Tony of exactly everything we do to make sure people know. And
I would suggest you keep this information in the 21-22 budget folder, because I expect it'll come up again during budget season.
Yes, and I'll come up with some good strategies as far as communicating this report out as well to our community.
Thank you very much. Ms. Adams.
Because some of us, if not all of us, because of the COVID again, people are more aware of the funding and whenever the money comes down and where it goes and what did it do and who did it serve. The report shows the different categories that we address. But the thing again is people are asking in emails to start meeting with some of us to go over the funding and where it's going. So I think where we are is, and Mr. Garrity, maybe you can address this with the Funding Allocation Committee. What do they think are some of the ways that we need to be able to communicate this to people, and break down? Because the report has all of it like in sections, but it doesn't have like total numbers of housing, utilities, homelessness, things like that, PPE for employees or employees of these agencies. I think there needs to be a basic matrix breakdown so people can see the numbers. Because again, right here, you'd have to read this and pull out a calculator and try to figure it all out. So, but it's a good job, but that's high level. I just want us to start thinking in terms of how do we ensure the community and the taxpayers see their monies and dollars at work. And with that, Mr. Chair, I move for approval of item C8.
Okay, this is just a report, so we don't have a vote. But I think what you're asking is it would be nice if you could have these grouped by categories. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, for example, you've got housing in here as opposed to homeless shelters, as opposed to food insecurity, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I think we can do that. With that, excuse me a minute, let me get back to my agenda here. We have finished the consent agenda, and we have 4 general agendas. We will now go to G1, if the clerk would please read that.
Item G1, consideration of items relating to the acceptance of emergency rental assistance program funds, resolution authorizing acceptance of emergency rental assistance funds and execution of agreements to implement program, and an ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the city of Winston-Salem for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Okay. I see Assistant City Manager Logan Ford on. I don't know if you want to introduce it and have Ms. Newman do it, but I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Clark. Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Allen, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee, members of council. The city has received a little over $7.4 million from the Department of Treasury for an emergency rental assistance program. There are several items for us to go over relative to this allocation. The city has already issued an RFP to identify the agencies that can help with the distribution of this project. And we're also looking to work in partnership with the county so that we can try to streamline this service for both our city and county residents to be able to receive assistance. Each time we bring funds forward, whether it's from the Department of Treasury or CARES Act funding, we also provide a table that shows all of the funding received to date and which agencies have been allocated funding, and then the status of that in terms of executing contracts once the state has been notified of these decisions. So I wanted to also just make you all aware that that chart is included as an exhibit in addition to the item that we'll discuss here. I'll ask our Community Development Director, Ms. Newman, if she will begin to specifically talk about the Emergency Rental Assistance Program and our work in that efforts, and if there are questions regarding other assistance that's been made available by CARES, that's in the exhibits, we can address those questions as well. Ms. Newman?
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee, and council members. Again, I'm Marla Newman, Community Development Director. I will start walking you through what is essentially page 2 of the CARF, where we talk about the funding priorities and administration of the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which for time's sake, we'll just call ERAP. And as you'll see that we have outlined the various requirements for how these funds are to be employed and for whom they are to support. So certainly those who've encountered an economic impact because of the coronavirus pandemic. There are income thresholds, 80% of area median income. And just for example, for a household size of 3, then the maximum income for a household that's 80% of area median income, and thank you, Meredith, for the graphic, you'll see is $48,100. So we have an income chart that kind of shows us what the cutoff is for the various family sizes here. And in a moment, I will speak about those that are 50% of area median income, which is a particular priority that has been communicated to all grantees by Treasury Department. Those are a priority income group, folks who are at 50% and below. So you can start to see what the incomes are for the various household family sizes. As far as the lease and this funding can also be made available for utility assistance. So first, the individual seeking assistance has to either be named on the lease or be named on the utility account. It can be an individual or a household that qualifies for unemployment. Of course, that the individual will have to verify that they've experienced a reduction in their household income, either through a furlough, a reduction in hours, or outright job loss due to COVID-19. Certainly being able to verify that they have incurred significant cost or financial hardships due to COVID, and that they are in fact behind in their utility or rental payments. As I mentioned a moment ago about the priorities, Treasury mentioned that those who are, again, at 50% or below of area median income, or those who have been unemployed for 90 days or more are to be prioritized. In the partnership that we are proposing with Forsyth County, we have also identified what we believe to be a very a serious additional priority, and that is for individuals who have actually received eviction notices. So that would be a third category of priority that us as a local community would like to prioritize. Again, we mentioned that we are looking to collaborate with Forsyth County. Forsyth County has received an allocation of $4,052,179. So combined, we're looking at just shy of $12 million. The request for proposal that was released covered the collaborative program that we're proposing. Responses were due last week. We received 3 different responses for different elements of the program. What we're looking for is what we call a third-party administrator, and that would be an organization or company that has experience allocating, managing federal beneficiary programs. We recognize that a program of this magnitude is going to require quite a significant ramp up in terms of staffing. The biggest push we will see is a need for individuals to do intake and make sure that the applicants have all of the necessary information that's required to verify their eligibility. And so we're looking at a pretty rapid ramp-up process, if at all possible, with the idea that once we're able to get a contract in place and the like, that we would want to try to have funds to, or at least applications available for people to start by mid-March. We're looking at applications in 3 formats: online, be able to call in and provide information by phone with the opportunity to take a picture if you have a smartphone and upload the verifying documents, or do a document drop at DSS. And then we're also working with DSS to have a small kind of intake center where people could come by appointments, but largely for sake of time and efficiency, trying to get as many people to either call in or go online. But for those who are unable to maneuver either of those, there will be an opportunity for tenants to come in person and provide their information and the backup documentation. I will pause for just a second to see if there are any questions before going any further.
Ms. Adams.
Mr. Chair, would a motion be in order right now? And then we have discussion and questions.
Let me get to questions because I want everyone to understand the motion is simply to accept the grant.
Right.
And as Ms. Newman just pointed out, she's just gotten in the folks that are interested and they'll evaluate it. I'm assuming sometime in March, y'all will come back to present that to us as a separate motion to accept those.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, I'm getting some, the attorney has a comment. Yes, ma'am.
May need to get Assistant City Manager Tasha Logan Ford to respond to that. I believe the package includes authority to enter into the contract as well.
Absolutely, it does.
Is that correct?
Yes, it does.
So there are two pieces. The motion does include the authority for staff to enter into the agreements after we evaluate the contracts in an effort for us to keep moving. The 10% of the grant amount of the grant award can be used for administration. And the other piece that I wanted to make sure we have an opportunity to discuss is also we have reached out to specific landlords that typically would have, that may have individuals that fall within the category of having 80% AMI, the 50% AMI. So we're also trying to make sure that our renters and our citizens are aware of the opportunity, but also making sure that landlords are aware of the opportunity so that we can try to touch as many individuals as possible. So we're trying to have a phased approach and trying to attack this from several different areas to make sure people are aware.
Okay, so Ms. Adams, just hold a second. I've got a number of folks that want to comment. I got the mayor and then Ms. Scipio, if y'all hold. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that Tasha Logan Ford just made that last comment, because we get calls in here regularly on folks who are getting ready to get evicted and just looking for some help. So I'm glad we're going to be very aggressive in getting the word out. Marla, I just was curious about if you could share sort of examples of these third-party administrators that you're looking at. Would these be recognizable names to us here in the community?
Some of the applicants are recognizable, and some may. I think it just depends. One applicant, for instance, has done a lot of work with disaster management, and so has been able to ramp up quickly and be able to provide case management services post-disaster to provide like FEMA benefits and things of that nature. So that was one of the applicants. Then there is another large social service agency that's local that has applied. And then we have the third applicant, primarily is at the table to offer the software solution so that we could develop the online application and be able to, through that online application, be able to draw the data so that we can do the appropriate tracking and reporting. So those are the three applicants, and we are looking at potentially not necessarily doing a complete turnkey, because we think that there are some aspects of what's needed that the Department of Social Services with Forsyth County is willing to assume. And then that way we have potentially more opportunity to use what might have been that full 10% for admin, maybe be able to still convey some of that as rental assistance, depending on how the rest of the contracting goes and what we're able to negotiate.
That'd be great if you could hold down administrative costs.
Yeah, that is the goal. And I also wanted to mention too, in terms of utility assistance, that utilities that could be covered include electricity, water, sewer and wastewater, natural gas, and propane services. Advocates and municipalities across the country are asking Treasury and HUD to also approve internet service, because so many people are working from home, so many students are still studying from home. That is a big push that's being made to the Treasury Department to allow internet services to also be considered an essential utility. And I'd also like to mention that a family has to be at least 1 month behind in their rent or their utilities, and assistance can be provided for up to 12 consecutive months to deal with either arrears, current rents that are due, and prospective rents that are due, which would have to be, eligibility for that would have to be recertified every 3 months.
Thank you. Ms. Scipio.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you. It's always good to be seen too. Concerning this grant, I think Ms. Assistant Manager Logan Ford answered the question that only 10% of the grant can be used for administration, which means that 90% would be actually going to residents. So that was one of my questions, and I think that's the correct response that she gave us. But my other question had to do with evictions. These would be evictions for non-payments, not evictions based on a breach of contract due to behavior. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. One of the things that's required is when an applicant ask for the funds, there is also some cross-verification that we have to do with the landlord so that we can make sure everyone is on the same page in terms of what is actually owed and the basis for what is due. So in those processes, it will become clear if we have basically a breach of lease versus someone who can verify the loss of income and the hardship because of COVID.
Thank you. Mr. McIntosh, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the point that Ms. Newman made about the effort to outreach people who may not have access to the internet. I know that in the world of COVID, people are getting left behind because they're not able to get on their computer and hit refresh. So they're getting passed by. So I'm happy to hear that we're emphasizing outreach beyond just those ways, and look forward to the program.
Thanks, sir. Now, Ms. Adams, would you like to make a motion?
I'd like to ask a couple of questions first.
You may, and go right ahead.
The process, Ms. Newman and Ms. Logan Ford, is it first come, first serve, or is it whoever has the correct application and the need? Because we all know what happened in Texas, I think San Antonio. They got like so many millions of dollars and the communities thought, oh yes, we all get a chance. The money ran out in like a couple of hours because people were putting in their apps and people were getting approved, much like Councilmember McIntosh, the small business loan money. So I'm just wondering how that will work.
Well, while we're still working on some of the program design, one of the reasons why we have talked about the priority being those who are 50% and below of AMI, those who do currently have eviction notices, and those who have been unemployed for 90 days. So there is a vetting process to make sure that those who are most in need and are experiencing the most severe hardships are in fact prioritized by the application vetting process.
Okay. I just want us to make sure we're on top of this because it could become like this virus vaccine, that certain people jump the line that don't necessarily have the greatest need. That would be bad for everybody, including the federal government. One more thing, two more things. Have we communicated or made sure, as you said earlier, that the organizations that are I don't know whether you call it the beneficiaries of this money, this grant money, the landlord or realtor people's organizations, the utility companies, and anyone else that is going to be the beneficiaries, because they are the beneficiaries of the money. Have we made sure that they have been communicated to as to what this grant is and what it does?
We are in the process of working on the communications and outreach strategy. The initial step we've taken is outreach to the Piedmont Triad Apartment Association so that they can notify all of their members. And part of the plan is once we have a vendor in place and the rest of the program designed, we will be providing PTAA with flyers that their member apartment owners, managers, and whoever can actually distribute in their complexes that will outline what the eligibility criteria are. We imagine that some apartment associations or some apartment properties rather already know who some of their people are who might be income eligible, but they may not know who everyone is who's income eligible. So the part of the push and the commitment from PTAA is they would distribute the information to all of their members who would then distribute it throughout their complexes. And then that way, that's an immediate connection to tenants who could be in need. And then of course, like I said, the landlords have to verify the information anyway, and they'd have to provide a W-9 and things of that nature as well, because we will be paying the landlords directly, we'll be paying the utility companies directly. So the landlords will need to provide a W-9 so that we can track what is being paid to those landlords. And again, we'll pay the utility companies directly as well.
One addition, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, one addition that we have is also trying to make sure that we've reached some of the smaller landlords that might have, houses or rental houses that are in the community as well. And we are working with Human Relations to try to address those smaller landlords to make sure they're aware of the program and the services that are available and can assist them to make sure that we're not missing a segment of the population.
As well as probably posting at eviction court, a flyer or something at the eviction court. So people who are coming who may not have heard about it, there will be information there at the courthouse that's also available that advises of the availability of the program.
I would like to see, and Mr. Garrity, this is not extra work. This is part of the project. We talk about that in another agenda item. I'd like to see what our marketing and communication strategy is. How robust is it? Because just like we said, there are big landlords and there's the person with one complex with 4 units in it. and they're renting them all to 50% or below medium income tenants. I would like to make sure that everybody, again, this is about equity now. People are very in tune to who got ahead of the line and who has some information that I never got. How are we going to communicate, again, the timelines, the dates? When does this have to happen? Whether it's with the landlords, the realtors, the utilities, the tenants, the citizens, the agencies. One more thing, Chairman Clark, is are we going to be able to collaborate with other nonprofits or other third, fourth party agencies or organizations outside of the county, DSS, and the city? And not just the third party people you're bringing in or vetting, but smaller nonprofit agencies in our community that do this work, but do it on a smaller scale. Much like getting out the vaccine information and getting people to get it. A lot of people had to be brought on board.
Okay, Ms. Adams, can I get a motion?
I need somebody to answer that for me first, Mr. Chairman Clark.
Okay, would someone like to comment on that?
And you're speaking from a marketing perspective, ma'am?
Not from a marketing perspective, but also, again, inclusiveness. Are outside of DSS, the county, and the third-party vendors you're going to bring on, will there be opportunities for small business agencies, nonprofits, or organizations that do this work already, whether it's for healthcare, Obamacare, or whether it's for this vaccine? We found that the entities that we always thought could get not just the top level income people, but get it all the way down into the communities to the actual all users of the system or process, or is it just going to be government doing this and nobody else?
I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's primarily government that would be in charge of administering the program at this time. I think there is some opportunity for us to engage with some of our nonprofit groups and our community partners around the outreach, and we can definitely develop that as part of the communications plan. But in terms of the administration, because of the record keeping and the documentation that's required there, it would primarily be your government entities thinking about the software that's needed to track the information and handle the reporting. That would be handled primarily by us.
All right, Mr. Chair, I move for approval of item G1.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Before I call the vote, I did have one quick question, and I guess I'll go to you, Ms. Logan Ford. Do we have any idea of the order of magnitude? Because as Ms. Adams said, is this going to satisfy 10% of the demand out there, or 1% or 80%? Because that's going to make a huge difference on.
It will. There is some preliminary work that we've tried to do to get an idea of how many households that we're talking about, and part of it is the federal government required us to do some level of a community needs assessment. So, using census data that we have for the area and thinking about individuals that have that 80% AMI, meet that 80% AMI income level, we project that there's probably 39,000 households that may be eligible for the program, or 39 households that are at 80% or below. Now, whether or not all of those households may have had a financial impact due to COVID, we don't know. The best estimate that we have right now is that you have roughly 2,500 individuals within that income range where the primary wage earner has been unemployed for 90 days or more. So we're trying to refine that number to try to identify what the need truly looks like. But I think for right now, we feel safe in saying that we know at least 2,500 households where the primary wage earner has been out of work for 90 days or more. But that number could continue to grow as the pandemic continues as we continue to be involved in this pandemic.
Okay. But at least that's a starting point. Okay. By the way, counting the city and county is roughly $12 million. If you divide that by 2,500 households, that's $4,800 a household, which should cover, depends on your rent, utilities and all that, but several months at least. Okay. With that, we have a motion and a second, so I will now vote unless there are any other questions or comments. This is an important issue. And I do not underestimate the amount of potential paperwork this could envision. We want to be sure it goes to the most needed people, but we've got to document all that, and that's not without a lot of effort, I realize. With that, Ms. Adams.
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Hey.
And I'll vote yes. Thank y'all very much. That was G1. If the city clerk will please read G2.
Item G2, resolution authorizing amendments to the Grand Pavilion and Conference Center lease agreement with PM Meeting Venue LLC.
Mr. Rao, are you out there? I've got your name beside this. Would you, I see
Yes,
you
sir.
there. Would you mind explaining this, because this can get a little complicated?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams, and members of the City Council. Last month, staff presented an information item to give you an update both on the current lease agreement for the Grand Pavilion and Conference Center space, which is located below the Embassy Suites Hotel, as well as an update on the refresh project that the city is planning. Today's item is an action item with proposed amendments to the current lease agreement for the Grand Pavilion Conference Center space. The entity that we have contracted with is PM Meeting Venue LLC, which is associated with the owners of the Embassy Suites Hotel. So just to kind of recap our recent history, back in September of 2019, PM Meeting Venue ceased making their monthly lease payments to the city. Those monthly payments totaled $60,000 and had not paid us through calendar year 2020. So there was a total in delinquent payments of $800,000. At that time, the city did send a letter of default at the end of October to give the PM Meeting Venue LLC notice that they were in default. One of the questions that was asked last month was kind of what has led to this situation. And in talking to the owners, it really is twofold. What I'll call pre-pandemic, when PM Meeting Venue assumed the lease agreement for the Grand Pavilion Conference Center space, their projections were based on the activity in that space prior to the renovation of the Benton. And once the renovated Benton opened up, a lot of that business moved over to the Benton. And so, for example, in 2018, they were projecting $1.8 million in gross revenues from our space. They only ended the year grossing about half that amount. And so that trend kind of continued into 2019. And then in 2020, of course, the pandemic hit, everything shut down. And so they weren't able to hold events, in the Grand Pavilion Conference Center space. The Benton closed. And so thus we had what we're calling also then the pandemic delinquent payments. And so so the way that breaks down is about $360,000 of that $800,000 would be what we're calling pre-pandemic. And then the remaining $440,000 would be the payments that accrued during the pandemic. The owner did note that they had made some significant investments in the hotel, in particular in the chiller, which services both the hotel and the Grand Pavilion Conference Center space. Altogether, that's about $800,000 in those systems. The owner also shared with me kind of nationally where we are, the landscape, and what I think we're seeing is on the national level that hotels in the best markets are seeing about a 50% reduction in occupancy. And then hotels in secondary and tertiary markets like Winston-Salem are seeing occupancy down 80%, which I think is really reflective of what we're seeing right now. And then for those hotels that actually depend on group and meeting business, it's even worse. So we did provide an extension on their notice of default through March 1st so that the city staff could work with the PM Meeting Venue folks and the hotel owner to kind of work through it towards an agreeable resolution path to resolve this issue. And so the item before you today outlines 8 provisions. I will touch on those very quickly. The first one would basically grant us, the landlord, immediate access to the space so we can continue our planning and design for the refresh project. And then also it would basically give us control of the space. We would move forward and operate and manage the space. We would, working with our current operator for the Benton, we would book the events there. We would, the revenue from those events, the expenses to support those events, all that would be basically accounted for on our books. And any net revenue that we would realize would go towards the debt payment on that space. So we would assume control of the space. Secondly, we would work out a payment schedule for PM meeting venue to repay the city the $800,000 in delinquent payments. The $360,000, again, what we're calling the pre-pandemic payment, would be paid out over several years at an amount, a monthly amount that would increase every year until that $360,000 was paid off. And then the balance, the $440,000 in what we're calling the pandemic payments, would be due and payable at the end of December of 2030. So there is a space there. I think part of that is a recognition that that $440,000 was accrued because of the pandemic, and we're in our efforts to work with them to try to find a path forward. This is what we're proposing as one of the amendments to the lease. Any events that are currently on the books that PM meeting venue did establish, we're going to work with them on possibly giving for those revenues if we actually hold the events. That may help them kind of pay down that $440,000 balance. In addition to this schedule, what we call the rent security clause that currently exists in the agreement would still be in effect. In other words, that security clause pledges the revenues from the hotel, not from PM meeting venue, but from the hotel, to ensure that their payments to the city are made. So that security clause is still in effect as part of these amendments. Also, we would be working with the tenant, i.e. PM meeting venue, to work with us as we're continuing our planning for the refresh project. We have already done a number of walkthroughs, and we have identified a number of systems that are so closely tied together that we're trying to figure out how we either physically separate them so we can account for what would be the expenses borne by our space versus the expenses that should be borne by the hotel, or to determine some kind of appropriate allocation where we cannot separate the systems. That's another provision. Also, the amendment would allow us access to actually start the renovation project. So basically giving us, as I mentioned, giving us control of our space. Also, just to point out any other kind of shared expenses that we have through the three-party agreement that has existed. If there's anything that needs to be reconciled there, we will continue to work through those issues. I don't think we really have any at this point. Also, all the other provisions of the lease agreement would remain in effect. So all the remedies that we have available to us, if they were to default on their payments for the $800,000 balance, those remedies would still be available to the city. And then the last couple of provisions, upon completion of the $800,000 in payments, the lease with PM meeting venue would be terminated. And then finally, the current lease agreement does provide an option to purchase. This is a $2 million option to purchase. Once the payments are made and we're at the end of the lease, at the termination of the lease, that option, the tenant would surrender that option to purchase. So kind of bottom line, the way staff is kind of seeing these proposed amendments is, number one, we want to recover our delinquent payments. We want to recover the $800,000. But I think beyond that, we're looking to assume control of our space. Back in 2004, when this downtown development project took place, we had one owner of both hotels. We had one manager of the Twin City Quarter, which included the hotels and the Benton. And now in 2021, we have two owners of the hotels and two managers of the city, of our space, of the city's space. What we don't want to have happen is that we're competing with ourselves. for business.
Mhm.
And we see this as an opportunity by assuming control and management of our space there in the Grand Pavilion and Conference Center, that we can actually market that space along with the Benton as an extension of the Benton. And we've even, staff person's even thrown out the idea, it's even referred to it as the Benton South, but that we really have an opportunity here to remarket, rebrand that space so we can attract even larger events. And so that's really the ultimate goal here, is to recover what we're owed, absolutely. But going forward, take control of the space to where we control all of our space. And we would realize the revenue from it, and hopefully that we would, over time, by booking more events and larger events, that we'll generate enough net revenue to be able to pay the debt on that space and really tied into our whole complex. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Rao? Mr. Mundy? And you're muted, sir. Please unmute.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Clark. Mr. Rao, has the Visit Winston-Salem group and Rich Geiger been part of this decision process? And can you share with us their thoughts on this transaction and arrangement?
Yes, sir, Councilmember Mundy. I have briefed the Tourism Development Authority Board of Directors over the last couple of months, but even prior to that, I've been in discussions with Mr. Geiger and John Wise, who's the chair of the Board of Directors, to keep them apprised of our process. And I do believe that they see this path as being the best path as far as the city taking control of all of its space and being able to rebrand the Grand Pavilion and Conference Center as an extension of the Benton.
Okay, thank you for that.
Ms. Adams, you had a question.
Yes, Mr. Rao, thank you for this update. I know we've been dealing with this situation for a while, and unfortunately, again, the elephant in the room, COVID, had a lot to do with this, as well as, what was happening beforehand. Do you feel pretty confident that this agreement is the best agreement that we could come up with in order to facilitate ensuring our tax dollars are taken care of?
Mayor Pro Tem Adams, I do believe that this is the best agreement we could come up with. I mean, obviously, they would cease making lease payments, after January 1st. So, our definite priority is to recover the $800,000. So I think that because the remedies that currently exist in the agreement remain, which also includes the security interest on the revenues from the hotel that is there. Granted, it could be a while before, revenues from our hotels, rebound to normal levels. But my hope is that we won't have an issue with delinquency, after this point, because we are trying to work with them. So yes, the city is taking on some risk as far as, operating the space, but, and having to book, events, that type of thing. But because we'll have one operator operating the Benton for us and operating the Grand Pavilion Conference Center, I think that there's going to be real opportunity there to really expand what we're able to attract to the city.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ben, are we not investing some money in the renovation of that space? And could you tell me what that project consists of and what the schedule is on it?
Yes, sir, Councilmember Larson. So back in December 2019, January 2020, the City Council appropriated almost $1.6 million to refresh the Grand Pavilion and Conference Center space. That not only was a refresh of the space, but also modernizing the elevator that services that area. I call it a refresh project because we're not reconfiguring the space. We're not going to knock down walls or anything. We are simply wanting to invest the money in updating the space. New paint, new wall coverings, new light fixtures, carpet. And part of that will be to choose a palette that ties the space into the Benton. It may not be the exact carpet and exact colors, but it'll be similar so that again, we can look at the opportunity of branding it as part of the Benton. Right now, we are working with a local interior designer on finalizing the specifications for the project. My hope is that we'll be able to advertise for construction towards the end of this month. and then go through our normal process of receiving bids, evaluating those bids, establishing goals for that work, and bring something back to the council, hopefully maybe in April, for you all to award a contract, and then after that's start it. So we haven't gotten a specific timeline worked up, but what we want to do, though, quite honestly, is take advantage of the fact that we can't hold events in there right now because of COVID, and quite frankly because the space isn't as attractive as we'd like it to be. But take advantage of this downtime and try to get as much of this project done as we can, so that we are at least in a position that when the time becomes that we can hold events, we'll be positioned to do that.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Hey, Mr. McIntosh.
Yeah, I serve on the Tourism Development Authority, and I know Ben attends those meetings as well. And the indications that we have gotten are that when things return to somewhat of a normal life, we're going to be the recipient of an awful lot of attention. People have not canceled their events here as much as pushed them back. And us being a smaller city, we feel like that the traveling public is going to start out traveling by car, not by air. So they're going to be looking for places close by. So we'll have people coming to us rather than getting on a plane and going to Las Vegas or Atlantic City or whatever. So, the extra capacity, I think, will be great. I know that when the downstairs of the Benton was finished, it was very successful, and occupancy there was very high. So I think we have the ability to attract the additional business, and being sort of the masters of our own destinies here, I think is good for us. So I'm looking forward to the work and to having this back in-house.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Any other questions or comments? If not, can I get a motion on this?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to second to approve G2. I will now do a roll call. Ms. Adams.
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Okay.
And Mr. Clark votes aye. That is approved. That's G2. I will mention to the committee and council, I have two more items that are both very important, and we will finish at 6 o'clock, and it's roughly 5:32. So we got about 15 minutes on each. If the city clerk will please read G3.
Item G3, fiscal year 2021-2022 early budget forecast.
Mr. Rao, I see you and Ms. Tony are both online. Whoever would like to present, please do so.
Chairman Clark, I'll turn it over to our budget director, Ms. Tony.
Ms. Tony, you have the floor.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Jones, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the Finance Committee and Council. So today I will review the early budget forecast. This begins on July 1st of 2021 through June 30th of 2022. We'll start off by just looking at how we estimate to end this current year. And so, as you recall, we budgeted $214.1 million, but we also projected to use $5.4 million in fund balance to balance the budget in FY21. The great news is that we will not use the $5.1 million. Right now, we're only projecting to use $1.1 million in fund balance for estimated year end. That is driven by the subsidy to the Fairgrounds Fund. And so we are projecting to end this year well. So that is great news. This is just a reminder of our fund balance at the end of June 30th of 2020. You can see that our fund balance actual was $49 million. Obviously, that does include the $5.4 million, so that will be updated for our June 30th of 2021 fund balance report. But currently, we're at $49 million for our fund balance. This is our general fund reserve policy slide that just is a reminder of our current fund balance. We ideally would be at 14% of our fund balance. We are currently at 10.06%, and so we would love to get that line up and actually add back to our fund balance as our revenues improve. Next slide. Okay, looking at FY 2022 for our projected budget, we have projected $208.5 million for revenues and $220.4 million in expenditures. And so this is fully loaded, and so that leaves a gap of $11.9 million. I will point out that typically you'll see a yellow line on our revenues, and that's for our $2 million that we always budget for our fund balance reserves. And so as you saw in the previous slides, that our fund balance is below our policy. And so for this current year, we are not including the $2 million to balance the budget. Next slide, Meredith. So in the yellow bar that you saw on the previous expenditure side, these are the drivers that are within that expenditure column. And so we've included a 2% merit for all employees. That will be a $2 million net increase. A 2% public safety supplemental pay would be effective January 1st of 2022. 1% public safety supplemental pay. This is just the 1% supplement that was implemented January 1st of 2021 of this year. And so the full impact for FY22 will be an additional $800,000. If we reinstate our parking subsidy, it's a $500,000 supplement, and then to make the fund whole, the additional funds, it will be around $800,000. Police has a contract with Axon, and this is for their body cameras, tasers, licenses, and data storage. And this is just a contract renewal. It is a driver in our budget, and so that cost is $420,000. We also included a minimum wage increase to $15 per hour. That would cost $280,000 if implemented. There's approximately 217 employees that would be impacted. That would go from $14.31 up to the $15 per hour. And then also a driver is the recycling contract. It is up for renewal. Mr. Taylor indicated that we probably will have like a fourth year's cost for FY22, so somewhere around in April, and so that cost will be $250,000. So total base increase is $6.2 million or 3%. Looking at our revenues, on the revenue side, our major revenues are obviously property taxes and sales tax. So on the property tax side, we're looking or assuming a 1.77% growth above estimated year end. And so that would generate about $1.4 million. You also are aware that we are under a reappraisal. So John Burgess spoke about the reappraisal process that kicked off January 1st. And so, so that will come into play later. But currently, this growth, it just assumes a revenue neutral adjustment in rate. And so we'll update this number as we get additional information from the tax office. For sales tax, this assumes no growth above projected year end, but $4.9 million is budget to budget growth, and that's what we're estimating at this current time. And right now, this estimate does not include changes to our user fees at this time as well. This is our property tax base slide. It shows the fiscal year to fiscal year, the growth in our property tax base. It breaks it down by all of the assessed areas, which is real property, personal property, registered motor vehicles, and public service companies. And so it's a 1% estimated tax base growth for year end FY21. And then we are projecting a 1.77%, as I mentioned before, for the tax base growth for FY22. And so this is actually real growth is what you're seeing on this slide. Just as a reminder, you saw this slide last fiscal year, that this is really just a new horizon. There have been long-term impacts of COVID-19 on the budget, and there's just a need for new budgetary constraints and a strategy to rebuild our fund balance back up to our 14% policy. So the budget goals would be, as you saw in the expenditure slide, is to reinstate employee pay for performance, to also replace aging equipment and vehicles and further our IT technology, and then to be very responsive to our growing service needs in the community. And as always, we want to maintain our city's AAA credit rating. Next slide. And to that note, and the fact that this is a new horizon and that we have impact to COVID-19, there was austerity measures that were adopted and implemented on July 1st in response to the repercussions of COVID-19. I won't go through all of these, but just to kind of point out that any new special projects above $1,000 would need approval from the mayor and council. Any unbudgeted expenses must, offsetting reduction expenditures would need to be identified. And once again, just the importance of us adding back to our general fund balance just to meet our current policy of 14%. So this is our review calendar for our budget year. Of course, today we're reviewing the early forecast. On April the 12th, we will do a trial balance budget. And so I'll present to you a budget that is balanced and how we got to be balanced. On May 20th will be the presentation of the proposed budget to the mayor and council. So this will be a budget overview. The council will have the budget documents. We also will present that to the community, as well as our 22 through 27 capital plan. On May 27th, there will be a finance committee budget workshop. That particular workshop will highlight our community agencies. And then that same evening, many of the community agencies and anyone who wants to comment on the proposed budget will do that at the public hearing. And then on June the 3rd, there will be another Finance Committee budget workshop to consider the budget and the property tax rate. And then on June the 21st, will be the FY22 budget adoption, as well as a second public hearing. And I'll entertain any questions at this time.
This is for information purposes. Any questions or comments? Ms. Tony, I'm assuming that you will be meeting individually. That may be virtual with each council member.
Yes, we will do one-on-one meetings.
Okay, so everybody keep that in mind. Ms. Tony will be getting in touch with everybody individually, and we would appreciate any comments, suggestions that people may have. This is just for information today. Ms. Tony, I want you to know we were going real good until that report. But anyway, we'll take it like it is. By the way, just FYI, there was a nice article in the Wall Street Journal today that talked about the fact that states have seen less decrease in revenue than they thought, which is what we have seen for the current year. This shows up in our budget in that we're using roughly $3 million less to fund balance this year than we thought we were. But the article also talked about the fact that it was cities and states are spending more money on certain COVID things, such as PPE and other type things. So just mention that. All righty, that's for information only, and we all look forward to meeting with Ms. Tony and giving her our thoughts. Last one is in the inspections division. If you remember last meeting in January, we got a report of some issues we were having as far as lateness of inspections, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, et cetera. We asked the staff to go back and put together some solutions. So I will turn this over to Mr. DeCane, I guess I'll start with you and then you can assign it to whoever you would like.
Yes, sir. Good evening again, Chairman, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee, and members of the council. I'll introduce a crowd favorite. Our Planning and Development Services Director, Mr. Aaron King, will be giving the presentation.
Mr. King, you have the floor.
Thank you, Damon, and good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Chairman Clark summarized it pretty well. As you know, we're having some timeliness issues on our inspections. We're not meeting our state mandated 2 business day turnaround there. We talked about that at length last time, and that report was attached to your item there. So at the request of the committee, we went back and sort of formed up what would be our proposal for a certification ladder, and that's what's included in your materials. I know we're short on time, so I'll try to hit this pretty quickly. In summary, what staff proposes, and we work very closely with our HR director to make sure this made sense in HR world, is basically if you're going to go out and get another certification above and beyond what is required for your job, then there would be you would be eligible for an additional 3% increase to your annual salary. And so if you remember back to our previous month's discussion, the idea there, one is to make sure that we can retain our existing employees by being competitive. 2, that when we go out into the market to hire and fill positions that we're competitive in the marketplace. And 3, to make sure our employees are more efficient. So when they show up on that job site, they can do multiple inspections at the job site. So those are kind of the 3 pillars of kind of what we're talking about here. So that is the certification ladder in and of itself. We did share with you in your report some budget information in there. And what I can say at a high level, and Ms. Tony is here if we need to dig in any further, is at least on the expenditure side, through the first 6 months of the fiscal year, we are spending below our budgeted amount. So that is good. And also on the revenue side, for the first 6 months of the year, we have generated more revenue than our 6-month sort of budgeted number there, what you would expect. So both of those are encouraging metrics there. Depending on which way council wanted to go with this, if you wanted to act on this and implement it in the short term in the current budget year, we provided you some numbers there. And for the current budget year, to get this off the ground, the number you're looking at is $27,000. And what that $27,000 does is it takes the existing employees we have who are eligible for the certification ladder program, and it compensates them for the certifications they would be eligible to receive compensation for. That's what that number does. And again, that's really only 3 months worth of additional salary. If you wanted to push this to next year, for the next budget year, the total you would be looking at there out the door is $158,000. And what that consists of, $105,000 of that is that's your full year cost of compensation for those additional certifications for all those employees that currently would be eligible. That's the $105,000. In addition, we would hope that we have some employees that want to go out and get additional certifications, because we now have a carrot to encourage that. So we don't know how many folks are going to do that or how many certifications we would be looking at. So we want to put a placeholder in there, and we base that on 20. So if you were to estimate, 20 additional employees or 20 total certifications, at a rough average of about $1,700 per increase in salary per certification, that puts you at about $46,000. I would be shocked if we got to that high, but we want to give you kind of a worst case scenario. And the third piece of that puzzle is putting some money in there to recognize that we do have to pay for the exam costs and the training materials for this. So again, if we use that same assumption of 20 certifications, that comes out to about $7,000. So that gives you kind of a total out the door full impact if you wanted to do this in next year's budget of $158,000. So again, as I kind of hit those 3 points, this is a really critical tool for our team in terms of retention, being competitive in the marketplace, and being more efficient in the work that we do. As you know, we are a city-county agency. We did want to reach out to the county because this does have an impact on their budget. I did check with the county manager, and the county is fully supportive of what is proposed in this memo that's before you today. So I realize that was very quick. I will end it there, and I'm glad to try to answer any questions if there are.
Any questions or comments? Mr. King, I had one. Apparently we have a number of employees that already are certified in multiple inspection areas,
Correct.
we would recognize them with additional pay, and then hopefully other folks would take the opportunity to add to their resume as well, so to speak.
You're correct, Councilmember Clark. That's exactly the way we designed this.
Okay. All right, Ms. Adams, to see you. Ms. Adams, you're muted.
I think we should go ahead and approve this, Mr. Chair. I know some council members may have questions, but right now we need to make sure that we hold on to these limited amount of inspectors that we have. If you look at the matrix of the other cities, we are sorely behind. And we need to understand that if business, development, building, construction is one of our main areas of revenue and growing this city, we need to make sure that we're on top of it. I am about moving this forward in April and versus to waiting the next year, because if the weather holds up and COVID keeps turning the corner, we could be really in a fix.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. McIntosh.
Yeah, I want to echo that. We're getting ready to hit the sort of the heavy part of the building season, and our guys are already stressed, already overworked. They would sure enjoy a vote of confidence from us by getting this started sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Mr. Mundy, you had a question.
Yes, and I agree with both of my fellow council members in pushing it forward, but I do have a question. Would there not be some positive impact on the revenue if we are in fact getting properties online faster and getting property taxes coming in? Maybe not enough to offset in one single year, but it seems to me that there would be a slightly positive bump to revenue.
Councilmember Mundy, I think you're right. The faster we can get folks through the permitting and inspections process, the faster they get online, the faster they create jobs, the faster they create tax base. In general terms, yes, I think your assumption is correct.
Okay, thank you. That makes it easier to palate.
Okay, Mr. Larson.
Yes, quick question. We have vacancies currently in that department on inspectors, and we're using overtime as a compensation to try to fill in that hole. This program will allow inspectors to work multiple trades on a single visit, which should expedite things immensely. But are we looking at trying to address the vacancies that we currently have? I am totally in favor of trying to open up this bottleneck as far as construction improvements go.
Councilmember Larson, so good news. We actually onboarded 2 new employees. As I spoke to you last time, we had 4 vacancies. We now have 2. We onboarded 2 folks this morning. So we're getting those folks up to speed and in the field as quickly as possible. And yes, you're correct. The idea is really the efficiency piece. So now if you're somebody who has multiple trades, the expectation from the city would be is that when you show up to that job site, you clear the inspections for which you have certifications for. So that's the idea, is it makes us more efficient in the field.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Just real quickly, Aaron, am I correct that the $27,000 for this year, that's the total amount, and we'd only be responsible for our share, and the county would pay us a piece of that as well as the budget for 21, 22?
That's correct, Mayor. Yes, that's just for 3 months worth of those additional salary increases for the current budget year. And yes, the county.
Roughly 50-50 or thereabouts?
Ms. Tony may be able to give a better number on that than I can.
Well, that's all right. I mean, the county pays a piece of that.
Correct.
All right.
I noticed this is on the agenda just for information. I would not have any trouble making a motion to direct staff to bring to the meeting next Monday night the official, or I don't know if this is an ordinance or whatever it may be, and we will just vote to for that type of resolution. This will get it moving a month quicker. Can I get a motion that sounds like that?
Move approval.
Okay, thank you. They'll translate it when we finish. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve a motion to direct staff to bring to the council next Monday night the official motion to put this into play. I will now call the roll to vote. Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Yeah.
And Mr. Clark votes yes. That is approved.
Mr.
Is there anything anyone would like to bring? Ms. Adams?
Yes, Mr. Chair, again, this is an opportunity for the city to collaborate with the Forsyth, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Schools with SOAR, with the Forsyth Tech, to start training some young people to a trade of what this is a job, inspector and whatever, and it pays great money. So we need to get the supply in the pipeline. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, ma'am. That is all we have. Mr. Taylor, I have got 5:55. We will adjourn momentarily, and public safety will begin at 6 o'clock, if that's okay.
It is okay.
All right, folks, we stand adjourned.